office to coordinate between the members. And the third part is the Consultative Council, comprised of energy and gas companies, whether state-owned, private-owned or multinationals. So it's a comprehensive organization.
The 7 countries have bilateral agreements between each other to export and liquefy their gas. The new organization has converged all these agreements into one entity, thus creating a regional gas coalition.
Today's event is a historic moment for the region of Eastern Mediterranean. All the countries involved in today's initiative decided to use natural gas and energy in general as a catalyst for cooperation and peace, and not as a tool for conflict.
We strongly believe that the East Med Gas Forum, especially as an international organization, it is our belief that this kind of collaborations are a perfect example of how countries in the region can come together, which usually have their differences. It's a difficult region. They come together to collaborate and find ways of how to be more competitive, in this case in the gas sector, for the benefits of their people.
The members are benefiting from the huge natural gas reserves discovered at the Mediterranean Sea recently. This gas can now be sent to Egypt for liquefaction in its energy terminals and then re-exported to Europe. A series of pipelines are now under construction to link these member countries together. Although the organization of the East Med Gas Forum has been established with 7 founders, there are signs that it's already going to expand. France has submitted an official request to be a full-time member, while the United States is seeking to become a permanent observer. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And shifting focus now, a move by the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, to launch a single currency regime is suffering yet another setback. And here's why. A resolution which was reached by Francophone countries to rename its CFA franc currency to the ECO isn't going down so well with several ECOWAS states, especially as countries are yet to meet the necessary criteria that will strengthen the proposed regional currency. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam brings us more on that report.
The West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, has spent the past 3 decades aspiring to establish a single currency regime for its member states. Its aim to foster regional economic integration and boost trade. Leaders adopted the currency name ECO with a plan to launch it in 2020. But countries have yet to meet up with the criteria of attaining a single-digit inflation, a deficit of less than 3% GDP, and debt profile of less than 70% of GDPs. But 8 Francophone countries have moved ahead to change the name of their CFA franc currency to ECO.
WAM's Convergence Council wishes to emphasize that this action is not in line with the decisions of the authority of the heads of state and government of ECOWAS for the adoption of the ECO as the name of an independent ECOWAS single currency.
There are growing concerns on how this move may hamper the progress of the project. Experts say that Francophone countries needed to make that decision in order to free their currency from France's interference as they begin a journey to recovering their economies.
I have to tell you that they are on a sharp end in terms of the macroeconomic management of their economy. They have no control over the monetary policy of their currency since 1945. So for them, it is a fait accompli that by 2020, they will begin to assume control of their own currency. So that is something that they've been waiting for. And they are not responsible for the delay of WAMSI countries from converging on our own currencies.
However, the concerns expressed by Nigerians and others are founded.
What worries people is how, what is going to turn up if France is to micromanage the currency for West Africa. How much of our reserves are going to be tied up in defending this currency.
Nigeria remains the biggest regional player with 2/3 of output. Considerations as to what veto powers accrues to Nigeria remains a big deal for the country. That and meeting up with the criteria to inspire confidence in the proposed unified currency. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And in South Africa, economists and analysts now have a clearer picture of the country's economy with several data released this week. It started off with consumer confidence numbers, followed by retail sales figures, and of course, mining production data. Well, CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more on those data points.
South African consumer confidence was static for the last print in November 2019, having dropped from +5 points in the second quarter to -7 points in the third quarter. This is the lowest level since the fourth quarter of 2017, which was at -8.
Consumer confidence has held up for quite some time, despite businesses being business confidence being depressed. Consumer confidence is clearly held up. So now it's a reversal of all of that, and I think should we have another tax hike, we might just see a further depression of consumer confidence, which is obviously negative for household consumption expenditure, and by extension, which is negative for investment in the country, because in the South African case, you actually have to see household consumption expenditure going up before investment follows suit.
Closely linked to consumer confidence are the most recent retail sales figures for November, which surprisingly exceeded expectations, up 2.3% compared to October.
We saw that uptick was a bit of a surprise for us. So that could have a number of implications. Number one, it could be that consumers just front-loaded their customary Christmas shopping, and they did that in November, which would have boosted the November sales. But it does confirm that the South African consumer has become highly price-sensitive in that they are more inclined to buy goods on special.
On the production front, Stats SA released their mining production data, which dropped for the fourth month in a row, falling by 3.1% in November. Platinum group metals, iron ore and coal were the biggest drags on overall production, and that's despite a rising commodity price.
We have been using the term that we are joined at the hip with Eskom. I can tell you the data of the variation in electricity on the variation in mining production. We actually have exactly the same heartbeat. It is exactly the same graph.
So the data points aren't very optimistic in terms of what's going to happen going forward. Everyone's going to have to buckle down and tighten those belts so that we can try and grow this economy. But the signs aren't looking that positive. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. Diversified miner Glencore is set to cut jobs at its South African ferrochrome joint venture with Miraf Resources. Now, the company attributes the decision to high electricity tariffs, deteriorating conditions, as well as financial losses. The Glencore Miraf Chrome venture is one of the world's largest producers of ferrochrome, which of course is used in the production of stainless steel. An Italian oil major Eni and France's Total have been awarded rights to develop 3 offshore blocks in Angola. At the moment, Angola is working to reform its oil sector. Africa's second biggest oil exporter is pushing through broad economic reforms, which include a potential sale of stakes of Sonangol and other state-owned enterprises. And power giant Siemens has sealed a deal with Ghana to upgrade the West African nation's electricity grid. The deal is worth about $278 million. It will enable the two companies to work together to develop and improve Ghana's transmission network. Under the deal, Siemens will also train Ghana's youth and provide training on its equipment in various engineering programs. And finally, German car maker Volkswagen is set to take a 20% stake in a Chinese electric vehicle battery maker, Guoxuan High-Tech. Now, the deal will mark Volkswagen's first direct ownership in a Chinese battery maker. It comes as the automaker strives to meet a goal of selling around 1.5 million new energy vehicles a year in China by 2025. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come on the show. We'll be chatting to a delivery service startup called Glovo that may soon give Jumia a run for its money. And experts call on the Nigerian government to crack down on counterfeit drugs.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. Go ahead up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Global leaders are meeting in Davos for the 2020 World Economic Forum. Their mission to set the year's agenda and ask the toughest questions, from resolving trade tensions to tackling climate change. Join us on CGTN for special coverage.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome back to Global Business Africa. Now, over the past year, Spanish startup Glovo has become a major player in Africa's on-demand delivery service sector. Operating in Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire and Morocco, amongst other markets, Glovo has joined the likes of Jumia, Uber and Yum to take advantage of an increasingly receptive market for mobile app-based delivery and transport services. Last year, the firm bagged another $166 million in Series E funding. It says it plans to use the money to go fully profitable as a company during early 2021, as it targets regions where competitors haven't already established themselves. Well, let's find out more about its plans here in Kenya and across the continent. We're joined now by Glovo's country manager, William Bentel. Great to have you in the studio with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Bentel. Well, let's talk about Africa's on-demand delivery market. It has become highly competitive. Lots of players trying to get into the market. What has been your experience coming into a growing market? And give us a sort of snapshot of the progress Glovo has made so far in terms of penetration and, of course, expansion on the continent.
Sure. Well, I mean, there are some markets that are enormous prizes for businesses entering in Africa, like Nigeria or DRC, urban populations, lots of people with money to spend on these services. But they're very complicated places to do business and very expensive to enter. Kenya is very different. It's in the top third of the World Bank doing business reports, thriving digital ecosystem, and it's a much easier place to enter and establish yourself. But of course, the flip side, as you say, is that it then becomes somewhere that many companies want to do business, and it's a sort of starting point for Africa, and it is competitive. The way we deal with that ourselves is we have brought a really differentiated product. Our offering is that you can get anything delivered to you from the city within 45 minutes. Different categories will range from sort of 30 minutes up to about 44 minutes. And it really is anything. This morning I needed to get something very specialized, and it was with me within 35 minutes. So that consumer promise has really resonated and has really driven our growth.
Right. So would you say you're offering a different product to the market as compared to your competitors?
Yeah, we're offering a broader product. There are some competitors doing restaurant food, some doing supermarket food, others doing pharmacy. We really put everything together in one app. And it's the one app you need on your phone to be able to as a busy professional, to get anything you need.
Now, you did recently adjust your pricing model. I'd love to know why you decided to make that decision, and what have you noted in terms of consumer behavior in these markets so far?
Sure. I mean, well, let me start with consumer behavior. I mean, consumer purchasing paths are just changing completely. Rather than being in a supermarket or a mall, you're now in your kitchen as you run out of an ingredient. Or you're in a matatu heading home and you order a product or your groceries and it arrives home before you do. So there are enormous opportunities here to take advantage of these changing pathways, and that's where an app such as Glovo really comes in for busy professionals and so forth. In terms of the pricing, you're right, this week we made a change to dynamic pricing, so we went from a flat fee to a proposition that I think is quite easy to understand. The closer you are to the store, the cheaper the delivery will be. And it coincides this week with us actually reviewing what we pay to the riders who use the platform and increasing the amount of money that we pay to them per kilometre that they drive. Right. So I think the reception has been pretty good. It's easy to understand, and I think the bottom line is that we're still about half the price of our competitors anyway, so it's a great deal for customers.
Now, you are a Spanish startup, and you're in other markets besides Africa, Middle East and Europe as well. Give us a sense of what your penetration into Africa has been like. Has it been profitable for the company so far?
Sure. I mean, well, Glovo is a company that really has profitability in its DNA. When I arrived for my job interview, I had a case that was all about profitability in the first year. That's not always the case in the sector, but for Glovo, Africa is no exception. Of course, in the early period, there's investment to grow one's market share. But you know, the more time you spend in the market, the more ways you find to become more profitable. I mean, examples of this on the revenue side, we work directly with brands. So, for example, Pampers and Huggies. We work directly with the brands to offer the best prices to customers, and of course that then creates more opportunity for revenue. And on the cost side, for example, we made a decision actually this week to relocate a number of our operations jobs from more expensive hubs elsewhere to Kenya, where we think the quality and the cost will be better. Right. So, you know, there are lots of decisions as we go that are going to drive us towards profitability.
Well, we'll be watching. But now, looking at the sector as a whole, some do believe that we're going to see some consolidation in the delivery service sector going forward. Do you agree with that? And, of course, can we expect to see Glovo either buying off smaller players or possibly being bought up?
Well, I think you're right. I think that certainly 2019 was a year of consolidation, lots of M&A activity, Amazon, Deliveroo, Just Eat, lots of examples of this. And I think as the year ended, there are certain things that will accelerate this process. Most notably, the failed IPO of WeWork. The backers of WeWork, SoftBank, were really like driving the space and investment in this sector. And they've had their fingers burnt with WeWork, and I'm sure investors are now going to pull back, access to capital will become harder, and that will accelerate consolidation. Last year, Glovo bought Pizza Portal, which was one of the principal delivery partners in Poland.
Right.
I know at the moment the effort is on making sure that these acquisitions work, and there's not much more I can say than that.
So no plans in Africa?
Not that I can really talk about.
Well, let's talk a little bit about regulation. We know Kenya's government recently introduced some new taxes for the digital economy, and that's going to target players like Glovo going forward. So what do you think about that move, and how have you felt about regulation on the African continent and here in Kenya so far?
Sure. Well, from what we understand, we know there are changes to the way digital businesses will be taxed. Towards the end of last year, there were announcements made about a new digital tax. These are actually focused on businesses based outside of Kenya selling their services here. So it would be, an example would be if you wanted to buy a Netflix subscription. Kenya at the moment is not making tax revenue from that, and they will do in the future if they implement these new changes. These things don't actually apply to Glovo. We're a Kenyan registered entity. We have to pay the same taxes as any other business in the country. Right. We're of course compliant with all those taxes, and we'll keep our eye on what's going on to make sure we continue to be compliant.
Well, we loved having you in the studio. We do have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. Of course, that's William Bentall. He's the country manager for Glovo Kenya. Well, let's move on now to South Africa. The country's stock exchange, For Africa Exchange, has announced the imminent listing of iHealthcare Group of companies. Now, the listing is aimed at improving the group's public profile to further brand awareness. With more on this, here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola once more with the details.
The two listings come at a time when the economic growth projections for the country are muted, with the World Bank downgrading growth to below 1%. And yet, some business people are upbeat.
We knew we could work on our infrastructure, we knew we could work on our technology, we knew we could digitize our operations. We spent a lot of time discussing the business with our clients, trying to find out where they wanted the business to go, and we've been recalibrating the business to do that.
Another business that's been recalibrating itself is iHealthcare. The group's listings are split into two. One will be openly tradable and the other will be by invitation only to qualifying medical practitioners.
Our vision is to decrease the cost of specialist healthcare, and we think the way to do that is to put the surgeon and the doctor in the center of the system, because the doctor actually determines the cost effectivity of the whole process. So if you empower the doctor, we feel that this will be the way in which we can drive down healthcare costs.
The South African healthcare market is still adapting to the government announcement last year that national health insurance will be introduced. It's aimed at providing good quality healthcare to all citizens, including affordable pharmaceuticals.
We will source medicines worldwide or locally that are cost effective and quality. Our way of doing things is a little different to some of the other companies where we have a clinical committee that tests every product, pharmaceutical or surgical, that comes in, and the quality is determined before pricing is looked at.
One of the challenges facing the South African public healthcare sector is crumbling infrastructure, something which the government wants to address with its new funding model. It's seen as an opportunity.
There are quite a few independent hospitals in South Africa that doesn't belong to a group, and some of those hospitals may look for a new home. So that is the one factor, but the second factor is also we are looking at building hospitals from scratch. That's definitely also one of our plans.
The healthcare environment in South Africa is going to get interesting now that the National Health Insurance funding mechanism is about to become an actual fact, and it might offer some opportunities to people looking to get into the medical space. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And moving on now, 40% of medicines sold in Africa are either fake or substandard. According to the World Health Organization, 900,000 Africans die every year due to fake or faulty drugs. Now, the problem is prevalent, especially in Nigeria, the most populous nation on the continent. Experts are now calling on the government to put the right measures to tackle the issue. CGTN's Phil Ihaza has more.
The circulation of fake and untested drugs on the streets of Nigeria is rising. This despite government efforts to combat a growing trend for many years.
Experts say one of the major challenges in the fight against counterfeit drugs in Nigeria is the difficulty in differentiating the genuine products from the fakes. Consumers often buy fake drugs thinking they're getting the real thing.
According to the World Health Organization, over 900,000 people in Africa die as a result of taking counterfeit drugs each year. With its population of nearly 200 million people, Nigeria is particularly at risk. The National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, destroyed fake drugs across the country worth $13 million in 2018 alone. These kinds of drugs, experts say, have an enormous impact on the health of consumers.
Fake drugs are not properly manufactured. You find out they may contain toxic or not so good impurities that will be harmful, can be carcinogenic, causing cancer to people that take it for other reasons. A tablet may have an overdosage of a particular item to a toxic level. So the bad effect ranges from disability to death and so forth.
President Muhammadu Buhari closed the country's borders in August last year to curb the proliferation of counterfeit products, including fake drugs. However, certified vendors in Nigeria say it's time for the government to step up its measures in regulating sales and distribution of drugs in the country.
The best way to get across this problem is to control drug distribution, discourage open drug market, which is the major portal for distributing drugs in Nigeria. Getting a central drug distribution system, national distribution system, state distribution, then to the province and the individual shops of pharmaceutical premises and hospitals can lift their drugs from the province where they find themselves.
For now, purchasing and verifying drugs from only accredited outlets could be the only hope for consumers in Nigeria. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Now, Ethiopia's state telecoms monopoly, Ethio Telecom, has reported a 32% rise in its first half-year earnings. In the 6-month period, the company's number of mobile subscribers rose to about 44.03 million. That's an increase of around 10.9% compared to 2018. With the details, here's CGTN's Gerum Chala.
The 22.4 billion birr, that is about $668 million profit, is not only remarkable but also historic for Ethio Telecom. The CEO Freho Tamiru said the revenue earned is 104% successful, above the intended target.
Compared to last year, we have seen a 32% increase. The telecom density also rose by 8.3%, with mobile voice traffic rising by 22% in the period.
The chief executive officer says the success of the state-owned telecom company is attributed to the massive capacity building work it has done over the past year on its 2G and 3G networks.
To achieve the 22.4 billion birr revenue over the past 6 months, we had to do several service improvement works. In the 6 months period, we have improved our 3G network to serve an additional 760,000 customers, with the 2G networks serving an additional 170,000 customers.
From international telecom businesses, Ethio Telecom has also generated $73 million in this half a year. This has also showed a 116% increase from the previous year. There is more. 3.9 billion birr in tax and dividend were paid to the government in this period. However, there were also several challenges over the past few months.
As Ethio Telecom management, we believe our income could have increased even more if we had not faced challenges like telecom fraud. Repeated theft on our 5 cables and copper cables resulted in the loss of millions. Power interruptions also led to loss of another hundreds of millions.
Ethio Telecom's customer base has already passed 45 million and has aims of adding 5 more million in a year or so time. Despite all of this success, the Ethiopian government is proceeding with the introduction of new telecom service providers into the country. The companies are expected to buy minority shares of the telecom giant in what authorities believe is an effort to modernize it. Still, many experts say Ethiopia must refrain from its partial privatization plan of its telecom sector. They say it's a good idea to invest on it more and more while under government control. CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break. Still coming up on the show. China's economy grew by 6.1% in 2019. And President Xi Jinping on a quest to boost ties with Myanmar.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time now. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, here's a recap of today's top headlines. Cairo has hosted the third ministerial meeting of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. This saw the signing of several deals, including the importation of gas from Israel by Egypt and the signing of a charter to form the East Med organization. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has welcomed General Khalifa Haftar's willingness to stick to a ceasefire. Berlin is also expected to host a summit on the Libyan conflict. Now, the summit aims to implement once again an arms embargo. Multiple countries have been accused of breaking a previously established UN arms embargo. And Ethiopia has confirmed the country will fill up the Grand Renaissance Dam over a period of 4 to 7 years. However, this is less than half the time proposed by Egypt, which has maintained a preferred timeline of 10 to 21 years. Cairo has expressed concerns over the timeline because of fears it could cut its water supply from the River Nile. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, China's economic performance was closely watched as the China-US trade war played out over the course of 2019. How did China fare while contending with stiff tariffs and, of course, a variety of other geopolitical tensions last year? Zhuan Qin breaks it down for us.
China reported 6.1% GDP growth in 2019. The rate was the slowest in decades, but China is now growing at a much bigger base. The country's GDP reached 99 trillion yuan this year. That was almost 3 times the amount from 10 years ago. The incremental GDP volume is actually much larger. China's economy hit a milestone in 2019 as GDP per capita exceeded $10,000 for the first time. Why does it matter? GDP per capita represents the output attributed to each individual person. It is a more useful metric for gauging a country's prosperity. Higher per capita GDP is usually associated with higher level of wages. So a rising GDP per capita usually means greater consumption power for the Chinese people. That is key to China's transformation to a consumption-led economy. However, it also raises concerns that China is nearing the so-called middle-income trap. Other key indicators include industrial production up by 5.7%. It gathered steam at the year-end as the nearing China-US trade deal improved business confidence. Fixed asset investment grew 5.4%, a slight improvement on the 5.2% growth reported in November. And that came at a government move to boost infrastructure spending to shore up the economy. Investment in the high-tech sector recorded 17.3% growth, underlying China's efforts for higher quality growth. Retail sales rose 8%, a key indicator of consumption. Retail held steady, but was down from 9% in 2018 amid the China-US trade war.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in Naypyidaw on Friday for a state visit to Myanmar. It is President Xi's first overseas trip this year and the first visit to the Asian neighbor by a Chinese president after an interval of 19 years. CGTN's Zhu Dan has more from Myanmar.
The Chinese president attended a welcoming ceremony held by Myanmar President Wu Wei-min on Friday. Expressing his goodwill towards the government and people in Myanmar, President Xi pointed out that the two countries, linked by mountains and rivers, share deep friendship. After the welcoming ceremony, President Xi also met with Myanmar's State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. Foreign Minister Wang Yi also joined the meeting. Over the past 7 decades since bilateral diplomatic ties were established, China and Myanmar have developed their bonds on the basis of 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which they both agreed on. President Xi also spoke highly of the achievements that have been made thanks to cooperation and exchanges in various areas. And the president called for bilateral ties to be pushed forward into the new era with deeper communication and closer strategic cooperation. China is Myanmar's largest trading partner. Their total bilateral trade volume in 2019 was worth $17.7 billion. Meanwhile, Myanmar is active in China's Belt and Road Initiative. One of the biggest projects under the framework is the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. The country's Minister of Commerce, Dan Min, said he expected to see continuous growth in bilateral trade, with both countries importing more from each other. And there will be growing investment from China in Myanmar in a broad range of sectors, including transportation and electricity, of which Myanmar is in great need. As local media put it, Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit, laden with investment pledges worth billions, could help reshape the country's economy. Zhu Dan, CGTN, Naypyidaw, Myanmar.
Now, after the welcoming ceremony, which was held by Myanmar's President U Win Mint, President Xi Jinping also met with State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. They agreed to hold more talks on Saturday to discuss China-Myanmar relations and other areas of concern to both sides. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also joined the meeting. Well, let's move on now. The capacity of renewable energy installed worldwide has more than doubled over the last decade. The world, however, needs to deploy renewables 6 times faster in order to cap global temperatures. Well, CGTN's Jacob Greaves now explores how leading figures in business, tech and green initiatives are looking to fix this at the ongoing Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week.
Whatever's discussed in these halls, recent events outside have fueled debate. COP25, December's gathering of global leaders looking to push ahead with a new climate agreement, failed to add fresh impetus. The question is how the world presses on without consensus from the top.
As we face 2020, which is going to be a super year, a decade of action is necessary, and we're going to need to have that leadership. Part of that leadership is starting to come from much more the business community, from local actors, from civil society, from the youth. So we're seeing actually other actors come up to the plate, but we definitely need more governments, and governments in this region as well, to step up to the plate now that we're going to have the G20 in Saudi, to really start to talk about new economic indicators, to start to talk about a way in which we can shift away from a fossil economy into a renewables and energy efficient economy.
At this event, much attention is given to the renewable energy push gaining traction in the Gulf.
The UAE is still reliant on fossil fuels such as oil, but the country is trying to shine a spotlight on its green credentials. ADNOC, its main energy firm, announced here that in the last 10 years its renewable energy portfolio grew by 400%, and the next decade is on track to double that.
The UAE as a whole wants 27% of its energy to come from clean sources by 2021.
We're planning by 2050 to reduce 70% from our carbon emission, especially from the power sector, because it's the main emission contributor to the total emission that comes out from the country. When are we going to see a huge impact? In a few years from now. I would say by next year we will have a huge impact on the reduction of the carbon footprint from the energy sector, basically because the mega projects are going to be connected to the grid.
But energy production is just one part of the story here. People are on the lookout for the next revolutionary idea to help reduce emissions. US firm Heliogen claim they found one, engineering a way to power manufacturing through sunlight.
Cement and steel are 20% of global emissions, just those two things. And think about this by comparison. All of aviation is only 3%. The heat demand that we have for making steel, for making cement, for making glass, all the materials in our built world use a huge amount of energy. We set out with Heliogen to make a company that could concentrate sunlight to such a high degree, we could achieve temperatures above 1,000 centigrade and replace fossil fuels in the materials process. And that really is a breakthrough.
A growing list of climate challenges are mounting as the world enters a new decade, but many hope so too are the potential solutions. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Abu Dhabi.
Now, of course, a company's brand name and how that directly impacts its bottom line is critical. Well, a company in Mexico has decided to lean into the controversial legacy of cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman by naming their beer after him. Well, El Chapo is currently in U.S. custody after receiving a life sentence for drug trafficking offenses in July 2019. Although reviled by some, Guzman is also admired by others in Mexico for having built a billion-dollar drug empire.
Have a cold one. Have an El Chapo beer. That is the message that a Mexican artisanal brewery wants to give drinkers with the launch of a beer dedicated to the infamous cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman.
Es una cerveza artesanal.
This is an artisanal beer with 4% alcohol. This prototype is a lager and it's made up of malt, rice and honey, so it's good. And the idea is for it to be sold in bars that stock artesian beer. And moving away from the brand 701, it is going to be priced at 70 pesos and 10 cents, approximately $3.
The beer is part of the El Chapo 701 brand, a company owned by his daughter Alejandrina Guzman and inspired by her father. The company has already released a clothing line and hopes the beer will get the green light from authorities to go on sale in bars across the country and beyond. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, on that note, let's take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices edging higher, but they were set to end the week broadly steady. Now, traders are saying that sluggish economic growth in China, the world's biggest crude importer, raised concerns about fuel demand and, of course, countered optimism from the signing of a China-US trade deal. Meanwhile, that trade deal optimism is having the opposite effect on gold prices. They edged lower today, on track to post the worst week in 2 months, as renewed appetite for riskier assets dented its allure. Well, let's take a short break now, still coming up. We bring you an array of the very best watercolor paintings inspired by South Africa's wildflowers, and a sip of Liberia's vodka that promises zero hangovers.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
And now let's head back to South Africa. The Kirstenbosch Botanical Garden has been inspiring artists there for generations. The Cape Town attraction is now exhibiting a series of watercolor paintings inspired by the country's wildflowers. CGTN's Renelle Del Carme brings us more.
The exhibition celebrates the work of the botanical illustrator Lady Cynthia Tate, who left her paintings to her grandchildren when she died in 1962. Her granddaughter, who travelled from the British island of Guernsey to open the exhibition, said she had stored her grandmother's paintings under her bed for 40 years, and they were first exhibited 2 years ago.
To me, it's absolutely magical because I've always known her paintings are beautiful, and it's given me the greatest of pleasure and honour to see that her work has been recognised as spectacular. And it's wonderful. I remember coming out here in 1959-60 and staying with grandmother Cynthia, And we went and collected flowers and picked them and took them back to the house at Lunkety and painted them.
Lady Tate fell in love with the flowers of Kirstenbosch and South Africa after following her British naval officer husband from the island of Guernsey to South Africa in the 1940s. Nature and art lovers agree that it's fitting for her paintings to return to the source of their inspiration, here at the Kirstenbosch National Botanical Garden.
The Lady Tate exhibition is considered to be one of the art industry's top events in Cape Town in 2020.
I think it's just wonderful because these botanical paintings are watercolors, almost 65 of them, of a collection of 300 and something, that are now actually part of this collection that are on exhibition. And they prove and show all the biodiversity that grew around Cape Town here on these mountains.
And I know some of the plants that she painted are now on the endangered list, and probably one or two have been lost to cultivation and or maybe extinct altogether. So it really is quite exceptional that her pictures from 60, 70 years ago now have been rediscovered for the people here and taxonomists and for botanists throughout the world, and they are a unique collection.
The exhibition will be on display until mid-March and also includes work by South African botanical artists. Renadol.com, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Now, a Liberian entrepreneur returned home from the U.S. to help start a brewery in the capital, Monrovia. His company, known as Ham Incorporated, recently launched the country's first all-organic craft vodka. Now, the drink caused a stir amongst the locals during the tasting campaign because apparently it won't give you a hangover. Well, CGTN's Daniel Pearson has the story.
The word vodka is derived from the Russian word voda, which means water. Surprisingly, the drink tastes nothing close to the word it implies. In Liberia, an entrepreneur has launched the country's first locally made, high-quality vodka. After training and acquiring the necessary skills, he made plans to return to his native home to start brewing vodka using locally sourced ingredients.
So this is where we get our raw material from to make our Hans vodka. This is our first step process, is getting your raw material at John Jackson Farm. These guys are grinding a cane, and once they grind a cane, they get the juice here, and we normally use the juice. However, if they want to make cane juice, then they take the next step further. But for us, we take the raw material at this level.
Primarily, vodka is made of water and ethanol. It is then produced by distilling fermented grains, potatoes, fruits, or just sugars. But this entrepreneur uses only organic ingredients to make the beverage.
I thought outside the box to see how can I make a liquor that's unique by using cassava and sugarcane juice blend. And I kept on practicing with it, trying to troubleshoot.
What sets this beverage apart from the rest is that during the process they extract the congeners so that consumers don't suffer a hangover. Many claim congeners contribute significantly to the symptoms of a hangover.
Fermentation starts at 30 degrees C, so we're waiting for it to come down to room temperature, then you can start your fermentation process. So this cassava we got here will be mixed with the juice that we brought. Normally it calls the beer or the wash that we got from the juice from the cane at the ground. It's already starting its fermentation, but we'll mix it up and then we start fermentation for 2 weeks.
Many who have sampled the drink describe it as smooth with no burning sensation. Arguably, it has stirred up excitement among the locals who are happy to support a Liberian product.
So I tasted it kind of very good and stuff. So I appreciate it. Now we are about to support it. Yeah, 3 for 5. It's good. Pretty convincing and decent for, especially young men producing the kind of thing of vodka. It's good to promote your own kind.
Currently, Jones has employed 10 people at his distillery. He hopes to one day raise that number to 500 people in a bid to create jobs for the youth and to support the local economy. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
And before we go, a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand edging up today after that surprise rate cut from the Reserve Bank. It, of course, was on course for its best day in more than a week, considering that it has lagged behind its regional peers this month. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling firm today, supported by inflows from the horticulture sector and, of course, diaspora remittances. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen, and you can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.